What up, y'all? So this one, I'm going to do the most charming slash most charismatic types. Um, Now, this one's going to be an interesting one because there are some misconceptions about which types are charming and or charismatic. Now, these are two slightly different words with slightly different meanings, but I'm just going to lump them all together just for the sake of this video. Now, there are certain types that would lean more towards charming, and other types that would lean more towards charismatic. I'm just going to lump them all together just for the sake of the video. So I got the dictionary right here. I'm going to look up the word charm and the word charisma just to help define things, just so there's no confusion. But so the definition of charm that this dictionary app specifically has, it says a power of pleasing or attracting as through personality or beauty, the charm of a mountain lake. And that is very similar to way I would define charm. Now I always would relate charm as more of a physical, along with, uh, it's not just your personality, but it's also a physical aspect of it that goes along with the personality. That's how I would personally um, define charm versus charisma. Let's see what it says for charisma. A spiritual power or personal quality that gives an individual influence or authority over a large number of people. Yeah, that's kind of how I would define it too. Charisma, a little bit more of a intangible aspect to it that kind of, it's more like a mystical spiritual aspect to it. Now a person can be both charming and charismatic. Both of them are kind of mean the same thing, really. Charm is just more of, you may use a little bit more physical qualities, which you guys know, of course, that could lean more towards a sensing type, and charisma can lean more towards an intuitive type, but it's kind of both the same. But anyways, um, let's get into it. So, um, okay, yeah. Anyways, so the first type we got ENFJ. Now, what I want to say. So ENFJs, I would consider them to be pretty charismatic and charming people. Um, they make the best cult leaders. If I had to pick a type that would make the best cult leader, I would say ENFJ. Um, Now, is it good to be a cult leader? Not necessarily. It could be. Not. Now, I know cult does get a negative connotation, but I think it is possible to, maybe there's good versions of cults. There's a such thing as a good cult, even though most of the time it's not a good thing to be in a cult, but there's a such thing. But anyways, ENFJs, I would say they probably do go S tier. I'll say that. Um, they have all the qualities to go S tier. They have the power to sway a crowd. You know what I'm saying? And then of course they're gonna lean more towards charisma's aspect of it, but they do have charm as well because they got tertiary SE that can help them lean more towards charm. So next we got the ENFPs. ENFPs, I'm gonna just say right off the bat, ENFPs are the most charismatic type out of all 16 types. They're probably the most charismatic. Um, not so. I wouldn't say they lean as much to charm, but they wish they could if they want to. But as far as charisma, they are the most charismatic by far. Um, it's really hard to debate. I would just say they go S tier for sure. Put them ahead of the ENFJ. Okay, ENTJs. They can definitely be charming and charismatic. Um, Now, when it comes to the elite levels of charm and charisma, I wouldn't say they necessarily would go elite, but however, they can fit in well and present themselves pretty well. But I think that's a different thing when you're talking about. It's not the same as charm and charisma necessarily. They could be good with presentation and things like that, though. Um, Now they're not like, I'll say they go B tier. Honestly, INTJ, I feel like B tier fits them. Um, Extroverted thinking isn't quite as much of a charming function as extroverted feeling or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yeah, ENTPs, I think they can be quite charming, um, well, charismatic, kind of like how the ENFP is. They do lack a strong presence though. ENTP sometimes have a hard time developing their presence as they get older. So, like, I know I've had a friend I grew up with. Well, I wouldn't say I grew up with him. I guess yeah, I did grow up with him. Mostly my teenage years, I was a friend with an ENTP. He was really funny. But like I remember early on in school, people didn't notice how funny he was because he just didn't have a strong presence, and he would be saying jokes, but people wouldn't really notice his jokes. I'd be like one of the few people that would notice how funny he was. Now we got to high school, later teen years, people he developed a little bit more presence, and people did think he was funny. But yeah, they do struggle with presence. However, um, they can be quite charming and or charismatic. Now, this is tough. I do kind of want to put them A. I think A tier is appropriate for them, honestly. But the whole presence thing can be an issue. I put them. I put them B tier. I put them at the top of B tier. I might change my mind later. Okay, ESFJs. ESFJs similar to the ENFJ. They could be very charming and likable people. Now, they are likable people because they're nice and they are giving and they're caring people naturally, but that's different than being charming and or charismatic a little bit. However, they are quite charming. Um, they know how to make sure everybody is taken care of, and they do things to accommodate the group and make sure everybody's happy within the group, just like how ENFJ probably would. Um, Now, with their introverted sensing, I guess that can play into it by making them lean more towards getting day to day things done, um, to make sure the harmony in the group stays good and the morale stays good within whatever social setting they're in. Because even though introverted sensing is related to the past, it's like bringing past methods to the present to achieve tasks. So it is also kind of present focused. So ESFJ, I would say ESFJ can go like A tier because plenty of ESFJs are pretty likable people and stuff like that. However, they don't have the as much of a natural over. There's types that that are more charming and charismatic than ESFJs. I wouldn't put them as necessarily top of the list, but they pretty high. ESFPs, I would say ESFPs definitely lean more towards the charming aspect of things. They are extremely charming, um, likable people. When you talk about ESFPs are super charming, but they have this thing to where ESFPs are by far, if you want to talk about like in high school, all the most popular people in high school are usually ESFPs. ESFPs can be insanely popular just simply off of them being so charming and having great people skills. Um, so yeah, they're super charming people. They just have really good people skills. They know how to talk to people. They know how to talk to people and make everybody feel like maybe heard in a way. That very similar to ENFPs actually. Um, ENFPs are great at that too, but I want to put them S tier as well, for sure because yeah, they're pretty great at people. It's like really hard not to like a healthy ESFP. Um, Most people will like ESFPs. They're be really popular. They are like very very popular people typically. Um, but yeah, ESTJs. Now ESTJs a little rough around the edges. Um, I'll say that for sure with that TE domness about them. They're a little rough around the edges. Um, I wouldn't say they're as charming as ENTJs are. Some about ENTJs, they're not. Um, I don't know if it's that they care more about being. I wouldn't say being liked, but ENTJs will say things that rub people the wrong way and things like that without realizing it, and that can take a little bit away from their charm. Um, they're definitely a little rough around the edges as far as their communication. That's what I meant to say as far as rough around the edges. As far as their communication style, they're rough around the edges. They can be kind of harsh and things like that, but they do mean well. A lot of them do mean well, but yeah, I would say as far as them being charming and or charismatic, this is kind of tough. I almost do want to put them D tier. However, they are great when it comes to presenting themselves and, like, let's say in a professional setting or something like that. Let's say if there's a situation where they're in a job interview, they're excellent and stuff like that. However, I think that's a little different than being like charming and charismatic in general. Now, ESTJs are not as unlikable as people make it seem like they are. A healthy ESTJ is very likable and well respected and things like that. But I'll say they go D. Um, yeah, I'm just going through my head and just making sure I'm not forgetting to consider different things about the ESTJ, but I do think they go D tier. Now the ESTP, very charming people as well. Um, Now the difference between them and like a ESFP is ESTPs are more naturally polarizing, and they purposely become polarizing. It's a very strange thing with ESTPs. They're very enigmatic in that way, as in like um on one end you like hate them, then on the other end you like, man, you love them too at the same time. As far as like how most people view them, think about your Jake Paul. Jake Paul's an ESTP. Um, he is very polarizing by nature. Um, Now they are very charming people. I almost want to put them S tier, but I put them at A tier simply because they're so polarizing. I only reason I'm not gonna put them S tier because of how polarizing they can be. But even then, that can be a form of, because that polarizing always has a purpose to it when they are polarizing. Usually they're polarizing when they're trying to promote themselves and things like that. Um, that's usually most of the time like motivation behind it. They're not just doing it for no reason. Usually, and I already talked about this in my video before, but I am real close to putting them S tier. I think I might end up changing my mind later, but yeah. The thing is, they can be kind of blunt too, and they can rub people the wrong way with their bluntness a little bit. Um, so that kind of is knocking them down a couple points. Um, but yeah, INFJs can be pretty charming. Well, I say yeah, charming, charismatic people. They got that extroverted feeling, so they can be great at making sure everybody's needs are met. Of course, with that is like depending on whatever social circle they're in, they can be a little off the radar too. As far as that, there's some INFJs that are loners. Um, as far as them being charming, I would say they go A, A tier. Yeah, they go A tier. Because they are pretty charming people, um, for the most part. Um, but yeah, yeah, A tier fits them. INFPs, as far as being charming and charismatic, it's kind of a tough one. Um, INFPs can definitely be likable people. As far as them being the most charming and charismatic, um, they're kind of similar in the sense of most extroverted intuitives. Um, Now, with that extroverted intuition, they could be quite charismatic. However, um, they don't have a strong of a presence, and they're also introverts, so that can take away from that a little bit. But I almost want to say B tier. Yeah, they can go B. Um, yeah, I'll say B for right now. I could change my mind later, but yeah. INTJs, now INTJs. Um, I would not consider them the most charming and or charismatic people, um, necessarily. Um, Mainly because I mean they can be admired, of course, depending on their competency level and their intelligence. They could be admired for that. However, um, then I wouldn't consider them necessarily charismatic or charming people necessarily. Now that's not a bad thing, but I just wouldn't lean that way towards INTJs. Honestly, I'll put them C. Honestly, I would say they go C tier, um, for sure. So INTPs, very self-contained as far as like, um, I think an INTP can be super introverted. Um, very they don't really have a strong presence too much. A lot of their thoughts are so complex and they're so internally focused and complex people. I don't know if it can like always translate well to like mass populations and things like that. Um, this was a tough one. I kind of want to put them where with INTJs, honestly. Um, this is I'm gonna tell y'all right now. This list is very difficult, honestly. Maybe because maybe I should have put more thought into it, but like I always do these on the fly. I'm doing the best I can because I could change my mind on a lot of these. Um, ISFJs. ISFJs are very likable people. When they're healthy, they're very likable. Despite any stereotypes about SJs, ISFJs are quite likable people actually. Also very misunderstood type, which I'm working to clear up some of these misconceptions. There's a lot of misconceptions about the male ISFJ. Always get mistaken as ISTPs. For some reason, people have a really hard time telling apart male ISFJs and ISTPs, but I'm gonna work on that in future videos and help debunk that BS. But well, I guess people kind of don't know any better. They need to be educated, so I wouldn't call it BS. But yeah, ISFJs, pretty charismatic people, very similar to the INFJ in the sense that they can be very great as far as um, they have a charm about them as far as them being just very nice people and helpful people, and they'll be genuinely helpful most of the time. Sometimes ISFJs can get to this thing to where they'll be giving, but like the strings attached that you didn't really agree with. But outside of that, I say they can go about as charming as INFJ. ISFPs have a quiet charm about them. I say um, very quiet charm, very likable. Um, it's a different type of charm. I was talking about introverted charm. Um, for that reason, they about as charming as an introvert can be. I'm gonna put them at A tier, um, simply because yeah, they're super likable. I almost could put them. I don't know if I quite put them S tier, but they can go pretty high. ICJs. Now, you would not necessarily describe ICJs as the most charismatic people or charming people necessarily. Doesn't mean they can't be likable because people make it seem like nobody likes ICJs, even though there are a lot of ICJs can be quite likable. Um, they're not quite as bad when it comes to charm or charisma as an ESTJ is. Um, but because the thing is about the ESTJ and the ISTJ, especially the ISTJ, my ISTJs are not really worried about making everybody like them. They're worried about getting their work done and handling business. They don't really care about that. I would put them possibly D, but they go almost C because there's some ISTJs that are very likable. Also, ESTJs, I mean, saying somebody's not charming or charismatic doesn't mean they're not going to be likable. You know what I'm saying? But just be for different reasons. Now, my type, ISTPs. Big misconception about my type is that we're not really charming or charismatic people. That is not true. I mean, myself as an example, I'm actually extremely charming and charismatic. Um, I can turn it on. I feel like I can turn it on or off. Honestly, um, I can flip the switch and I can just be super charming. I can go up to strangers and just turn the charm on. There was this girl I was dating a while ago. Now that I'm thinking about it, um, she didn't understand like how people liked me so much without me trying. And I would tell her, I'm like, yeah, I'm actually pretty charming, believe it or not. I don't. It's a different type of charm because ISTP by nature we're not like needy people. We don't need people to like us. We're not trying to go in. We're not doing this over the top stuff to seek people's approval. We're just kind of being ourselves, and people naturally will gravitate to us and like us just simply because they can sense that we're not trying to get too hard to make them like us. And from us not trying too hard and not caring about people liking us or doing approval seeking behaviors, it makes other people at ease and it makes other people like us a lot. Um, but yeah, I'm naturally charming. I can say stuff to people, have people like, man, I like that guy. I don't know what it is about that guy, but I like him. But it's an introverted charm, but at the same time, it's like I can kind of mimic an extrovert in some cases even. But people still will know I'm an introvert for sure. Cause I get exhausted doing that, like the extrovert mimicry a little bit. And I'll be like, man, I don't feel like talking for a whole rest of the next day after that. But yeah, we'll go A. Um, Now looking at it, I do want to put ESTPs S tier now. Yeah, ESTPs deserve S tier. Now looking at it, I'm just trying to see. There's nothing I really changed as of right now. Now with some more thought, I could change it later. Change my mind on it later. But I think that's a solid list for right now. That's the best I could do for right now. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, thanks for watching. Make sure y'all stay tuned for more. Y'all have a nice one.